Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Late Show. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. I'm so happy to be with you. It's been a long week, so I was feeling a little out of it. I was feeling a little tired, but I seem to have found my second wind, so I didn't want to have this beautiful night go to waste. The Geneva auction season is upon us. Everyone is descending upon Geneva right about now, already earlier in the week, really. But the auctions are taking place. We have covered together Phillips and Christie's, and we're still in the thick of it with Sotheby's important watches. So let's get back to that. But before that, I actually want to take a look at a few things that I already posted, um, and I already talked about. Remember, Romain Gauthier was here in Los Angeles as part of his little U.S. tour. Previously, of course, New York Times had covered him, and he had identified LA as his favorite city, at least stateside. It was really nice to see him. He was wearing a very special watch himself. This very watch that you are looking at right now. As you know, the model that was first released as the Continuum, and that simply goes by C now, or C by Romain Gauthier, has become kind of an open secret, kind of a silent flagship model for Romain Gauthier, and it is really at the heart of the brand's expansion these days. I hesitate to say popularization because, as an independent watchmaker, Romain Gauthier, even though his name is no longer a secret, is still a very, very low production independent watchmaker that has a few very complicated gems, logical one being an important example, but also watches that represent classical elegance in a more evolved manner. And the Continuum itself, the C, has grown out of that brand motto, the evolution of tradition, and it does have two different faces, so to speak, two different main lines. It has a platinum edition that is part of the Heritage collection and a titanium edition that is part of the so-called Freedom collection. And there has been a consistent effort to release that titanium edition in the form of limited examples, limited pieces. And this is edition 5. There will also be an edition 6, I believe, which maybe for a while, perhaps the last one, at least for the time being. He was himself wearing this watch, which was then not yet revealed. And as you can see, perhaps from the video, if I may stop here, it has a very special champagne dial. Of course, as with all the titanium edition models, it's fully executed in titanium, mounted on a rubber strap. The case is in titanium. The movement is in titanium. And of course, the dial too is in titanium. And as you, for example, if you take a look here, basically that same finish that decorates those three-finger bridges, which of course take their cue from classic pocket watch movement architecture that are executed in this modern manner as part of the movement for the continuum, are decorated on the bridge plates with this hand hammering, hand engraving method. So in this edition 5, that is carried onto the dial, and matched also with a very subtle burgundy accent, which both characterizes the signature of the brand as well as the kind of sunray pattern that emanates from under the seconds subdial. That is also matched with this rubber grip, which is part of the crown. And the watch, I believe, comes alternatively with a kind of beige gray strap that is more akin to the tones of the dial, or I believe also a burgundy strap, which of course takes after the accents that distinguish the dial and the crown here. I believe it's in 88 examples, and I know Rostovsky Watches, which hosted the event, is already taking orders. I think they have their allocation, and I believe Cellini from the East Coast is also going to have a handful of them. So those are the two great options. Of course, Romain Gauthier has other dealers as well, other representatives, other distributors. So if you wish to do your business with them, obviously I don't get anything from the brand or those particular dealers. I just like them as people. So I figured I might as well mention them. And again, I feel this is an ingenious way of somehow carrying out that notion of having an integrated piece. You guys know it's no secret that I really adore the titanium bracelet version, which of course takes that principle of integration into its logical conclusion. But here too, you have a dial that basically mirrors the finishing of the movement and is also made from the same material, which it's really incredible. And again, you know, we can't divine into the future. We can't really see what's going to happen with Romain Gauthier as a brand or with the Continuum as a design, as a particular expression of this sports chic genre. But if you think about it, these sorts of dials are very rarely found in the genre. Of course, there are the famous Tuscan or Florentine dials for the Royal Oak, which are extremely rare and which always carry a certain premium. So beyond thinking of how attractive it would be in the future, it is certainly a very rare representation of a certain aesthetic that you can hardly get close to at retail, except for Romain Gauthier. Of course, you can try to hunt down some of those Tuscan dials when it comes to the AP Royal Oak in the auction circuit, but those are always those always come with a fair bit of premium, so to speak. In fact, I believe there was an example in the Sotheby's important watches that we looked at, so we can kind of go back and see what it demands. Of course, that was a perpetual calendar, a much more complicated watch. But that being said, again, that kind of work on the dial of a watch in this kind of genre, luxury sports watch, integrated bracelet watch, whatever you want to name it, sports chic. It's just a very, very hard to find. It's very hard to find that kind of detail, that kind of handwork. Trying to see if I can find that AP I was talking about. Thank you for being with me, by the way. So if you are just joining the show, we are talking about Romain Gauthier's new release of the C Titanium Edition 5, which has this special hand-engraved dial that mimics the finish on the bridges of the movement and carries it out in a splendid, expanded fashion on the dial. And it's really an incredible, incredible piece. I was there. Right here, it was lot 46 of the upcoming Christie's Rare Watches auction that I've covered in a previous live stream, November 6th in Geneva, and this is the Tuscan Blue Dial on an AP Royal Oak perpetual calendar from around mid-90s, reference 25686 SP, so stainless steel case and bracelet with the octagonal bezel, as well as the tapering interlinks of the bracelets executed in platinum. And the pre-auction estimate for this watch is 110,000 to 220,000 Swiss francs. So, just to have an idea about how rare this kind of work is when it comes to heritage brands, and how much of a premium it carries when it actually comes up for public sale on an auction. Obviously, again, that doesn't say anything directly about the value, the future value, let's put it that way, about Romain Gauthier Titanium Edition 5, which can inspire also future dial variations in the bracelet version as well. But it does tell you something about what makes such independent makers so attractive, because they offer this kind of work in very exciting designs and usually with a certain personal touch. So it's quite amazing, and it's still quite limited. Again, only 88 pieces for this edition 5 that was announced today. Also, earlier today I posted this on Instagram. You can take a look right here and follow me on Instagram if you aren't already. This is the unified heavyweight champion of the world, Ukrainian Alexander Usyk, who used to be the undisputed cruiserweight and who has moved up to heavyweight, and basically wrested Anthony Joshua off his 3 titles by beating him twice. The rematch was actually held in Saudi Arabia, so he already has familiarity with the scene there, with the boxing promotion that goes there. And I remember he had landed, I think that fight was held in Jeddah, I think. He landed there wearing a so-called Batgirl 126710 BLNR on the Jubilee bracelet. And he seems to have stepped up since then. And he's posing here with Turki Al-Sheikh, who I think also owns a football club, but has most recently really started pouring a lot of money into organizing these sorts of high-profile sports events out of Saudi Arabia. He was the man behind the recent Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou fight. And I think they are trying to make the Fury Usyk fight happen as well, which will be for the undisputed heavyweight championship with all of the 4 belts on the line. And as you can see, Usyk is wearing here the 50th anniversary platinum Rolex Cosmograph Daytona. And as much as you can make out from the picture, it is the ice blue dial, kind of in the two-tone version without the burgundy or maroon outer rings, which means that it is the one with baguette cut diamonds as our markers. So that's quite a step up from a GMT Master 2, I would say. And it looks pretty cool on the heavyweight champion of the world. So let's step right into the Sotheby's important watches auction that I've been covering from yesterday. This is the live event. This is the live auction that's going to take place on November 5. I'll post the link as always in the chat so you can browse the selection, go through the lots yourself as well. And if you have any questions, if you want me to pay attention or put under closer scrutiny any of the lots, you just let me know. You send a message, ideally, you send a message in the chat, ideally as a super chat, and I would be more than happy to dive into that particular lot and with some significant historical and horological detail. So since I have already covered some of these watches, I'm just slowly scrolling through them. Here's a very interesting example of the Aquanauts. Interestingly, this is a very rare version in the sense that it is the 5167 in white golds, and gem set on the bezel as well as the lugs. Lot number 25, 5167, line 300G, with baguette cut diamonds on the bezel and on the lugs, the 40 millimeter sizing, the modern jumbo sizing of the Aquanaut. And of course it has which is my favorite aspect of this particular generation, it has that approach to the integrated bracelet watch designed to be worn on a rubber band, which means that the rubber band actually sits flush on the case and with the lugs, and has a pattern that seems to echo, that seems to mimic the globescape pattern on the dial. Of course, earlier versions of the Aquanaut, which was introduced for the first time in 1997 with the 36.5 millimeter sizing, I believe at the time, had a more sort of quasi militaristic look, which shouldn't surprise all that much because the watch at least takes after some parts of the field watch aesthetic, right, with oversized Arabic numerals especially, and a dial layout that seems to privilege legibility. Earlier versions had a different pattern on the dial and on the rubber band, which didn't sit flush with the case at all. And that was more of a grenade-like pattern, and more of a classic waffle pattern on the rubber strap. All right, coming back to this excessively luxurious version, we have basically a version of the 5167A that is much more precious, both because the case is in white gold and there is some serious gem setting going on with the baguette diamonds on the bezel and on the lugs. Otherwise, in terms of its specifications, in terms of its movements and everything else, it's the same as the steel version, 5167. And as you can see, the flanks are set with baguette diamonds as well. It features overall 101 baguette cut diamonds, which totals 6.32 carats. And this lot, lot number 25, actually comes as a full set as well. And this particular execution, this particular variation of the 5167 is believed to have been produced in about 10 examples, so quite exclusive. The pre-auction estimate for lot number 25, which is a Patek Philippe Aquanaut in white gold, gem set with baguette cut diamonds all over the case, 40 millimeters in diameter. The value is set roughly between 265,000 to 353,400 in US dollars. Lot number 40 is a very interesting Rolex watch, the so-called Texan or Tejano. It was one of those watches that were produced in response to the quartz age, in response to, you might say, the quartz crisis. This particular example is from early 70s, 1971. It features the Beta 21 movement, the 21 referring to the 21 manufacturers that collaborated to form the Centre électronique et horlogère. Both of the auction killer brands, Rolex and Patek, had their share of Beta 21 watches that have over time become quite collectible. And the Texan is quite important also historically for Rolex, because after all, it was the first quartz watch ever manufactured by the company. And the first batch of 1,000 pieces was produced in yellow gold and numbered on the case back, which again is quite rare, as you know, for Rolex watches. King Midas is another series that has numbers on the case back. Much like the later oyster quartz, this model has that integrated bracelet aesthetic, while preserving a lot of visual aspects of a Rolex timepiece, including the fluted bezel and the Cyclops style date magnifier at 3 o'clock. This is reference 5100, number 510 of the Rolex Texan in yellow gold, with pre-auction estimates set between roughly 13,250 to almost 20,000 in US dollars. Lot 41 is a Gran Seco of a similar historic importance to its respective brand. Because the first Gran Seco was entered into production in April 1960, and this watch belongs to that first series. It was launched on December 18th, and this particular piece is from 1961. First Japanese watch that received the superior chronometer standards from the Bureau officiel de contrôle de la marche des montres in Geneva. This gold-plated watch has a beautiful Gran Seiko signature in their classic stylized font at 12 o'clock. Hey, JB. Thanks for letting me know, man. Oh, man. Um, Thank you. Yeah, we were. Well, let's do this again, huh? Um, yes, we're talking about Sotheby's Important Watches, which is going to take place live on November 5th in Geneva. And this is lot number 45, which is a very interesting example of a late 50s Rolex Datejust, the reference 6605, purportedly made for coffee traders from South America. Um, Kind of an apocryphal story, but in either case, it seems to make sense. Originally fitted on the mesh style bracelet that you're seeing, entirely executed in 18 karat yellow gold, with a fluted bezel and a champagne dial that is further ennobled by baguette cut diamonds as hour markers. A very rare and interesting piece. Fascinating example of a late 50s Rolex Datejust with a pre-auction estimate that is set in the range between 55,000 to 110,000 in US dollars. Right, JB? It's very interesting. Because of course, this kind of gem setting, starting with the 80s especially, uh, becomes, of course, it's still rare, but becomes kind of part of the game with Rolex, even or perhaps especially on the professional line, on the sports models. Um, Beyond jewelry watches made for women, it's quite rare to see this kind of configuration. Um, and it's a very interesting style at any rate, right? The full gold Datejusts are an acquired taste, right? People usually yearn for or aspire to a day date when it comes to this particular style of a gold Rolex watch. But certainly an interesting niche, and you can hardly find a more distinct example than something like this. Again, here is the link to the auction. So if you want me to take a closer look at any other particular lots, I'll be more than happy to. Speaking of things that Rolex used to do and no longer does, here's a great example of that. This is a date reference 18 to 48. A day date with a beautiful burlwood dial that has a bark finish on the bezel and the center links of the bracelet. That's really not my favorite, to be honest. I never got interested in the bark finish. I never understood its appeal, but not everything, of course, that is made in the world of watches is for me. So I appreciate it, I respect it, but the wooden dials for me are always captivating. And there's always something to be said, of course. These sorts of dials, whether we are talking about semi-precious stone or wood dials like this, they're always unique. No two slices, no two cross sections of those materials are exactly the same. So in addition to already conveying this time out of joint vibe, it's also a very interesting way of getting into what is essentially a one-of-a-kind watch. And you have, I mean, not everyone has been here all along the ride. Not everyone is here every night, so you may not have heard me saying this. I always warn people away from buying these sorts of watches in an auction. I think when it comes to vintage day date and Datejust, the first instinct should always be to source the best example you can, the most well-preserved case, with the best condition bracelet, with minimal to no stretch, and then maybe you can hunt for a special dial on top of that, because usually when these kinds of pieces sell on auction, especially with some of the rare examples of the semi-precious stone dials, it can go crazy because, again, on the mainstream, the day date is not what it was, right? It's not the ultimate aspirational watch. There's just too much competition for it at this point in time. There are just too many options and alternatives out there. That being said, when it comes to collectors and when it comes to crazy collectors, which is of course redundant, right? We're all crazy. The day date collectors may occupy quite a different rung of the hierarchy. So whenever very special day dates come on auction, there's always two or three, sometimes a handful of people bidding on it. And on popular auctions, they can go for seemingly unconscionable premiums. So unless you find a very good deal elsewhere, unless something falls through the cracks, and especially because there is no surefire way of always matching the dial with the original watch, because there's no surefire way for most of the time to know that the watch was in fact born with that dial. It's usually not worth paying that kind of premium, but that's just my stance. Your mileage may vary, others might freely disagree. And this is what I want to say about lot number 48-2, even though the estimate itself doesn't seem that outrageous, but that doesn't say much. You have to see how the auction actually unfolds in real time. This is a reference 18248, classic Rolex Datejust, double quick sets in 18 karat yellow gold with a bark finish on the bezel and on the center links of the presidential bracelets, and with a burl wood dial from around 1979. The piece has a pre-auction estimate set between roughly $22,000 to $33,000 in US dollars. Speaking of very attractive and desirable Rolex day dates with special dials, we have at lot 49 a very attractive example of a single quickset day date, 18038, with a lapis lazuli dial, which seems eminently appropriate for a day date because it's a beautiful and patterned blue that has these sorts of gold dust-like speckles sprinkled throughout. And of course, as you have seen with many examples of this style of tiles before, it is presented in a minimally molested or minimally interrupted fashion, meaning there's just a few lines of writing, no hash marks for seconds or minutes, no hour markers, just, again, a few lines of writing, the coronet, and the framed aperture for the day and date, which gives you, of course, the full appreciation of the actual star of the show. It's a classic 36 millimeter 18 karat yellow gold case mounted on a presidential style bracelet. And at lot number 49, this watch is expected to fetch an amount somewhere in the region between 33,000 to 55,000 in US dollars, roughly speaking. While I take a quick break, I want to leave you with this beautiful classic Patek Philippe perpetual calendar in platinum. Please hit the like button. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. We are back. We're looking at Sotheby's important watches that's going to take place on November 5th in Geneva. And this is lot number 4, Philippe Perpetual Calendar 5050P. It's a very classically oriented design, 36 millimeters in diameter, and with a retrograde date hand that indicates the date on this scale at the center of the dial that is shaped in the form of a downward facing crescent. It's balanced out by an aperture for the moon phase indicator and three further wickets. At 3 o'clock, you have the month. At 9 o'clock, the day of the week. And at 12 o'clock, right under that scale and above the signature, you have the leap year indicator. Otherwise, the watch is a three-hander with leaf-styled hands for the hour and minutes and center sweep seconds. So this watch is essentially a contemporary of the 3940. But of course, it has a different style of expression on the dial, unlike the 3 sub-dial layout that the 3940 uses. And also it has, unlike the 3940, it has a self-winding movement with a full rotor, which you can't see in this particular example because it still has the service sticker from on the case back. Of course, the 3940 has the micro rotor movements. Very beautiful neo-vintage Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar, reference 5050P in a 36 millimeter platinum case. And with a retrograde date hand, which of course snaps back to 1 at the beginning of each month. Lot number 54 is expected to realize a final hammer price somewhere between 33,000 to 55,000 in US dollars. At lot 56, we have a very unique example of a Patek Philippe Calatrava in platinum. This is the reference 3998, 3998P, of course. These were quite a mystery when they first appeared on the public market, apparently in 2014, due to the hieroglyphs on the dial. Of course, they are reminiscent of Masonic watches. However, this particular watch is actually made for Qatari prince who once served as Minister of Culture, Arts and Heritage, and who was also an avid art collector and the owner of the Henry Graves Super Complication, which he bought during the 1999 Time Museum auction in New York City. And I think upon his death, the Henry Graves Super Complication was sold in Geneva for 24 million US dollars, which still is the highest price ever achieved for a pocket watch. So on the dial, basically at 6 o'clock, the hieroglyphs spell out Saud and Athani at 12 o'clock, which is the name of this Qatari prince. And apparently the current lot, the one that you're looking at, lot number 56, was a personal gift by Saud Athani to a Scandinavian gentleman. And it's believed that all of these hieroglyph, the Egyptian hieroglyph dials that are found in this Calatrava series were ordered by Sheikh Saud ibn Muhammad al-Thani. And you might remember that before it was sold, the Henry Graves Super Complication was actually loaned by this prince to the Patek Philippe Museum, which of course is a testament to his personal relationship to the brand. So it shouldn't surprise that he could commission basically a small series of bespoke watches or bespoke versions, let's say, of the 3998P. A very interesting and rare version of a Patek Philippe Calatrava from early 2000s, 34 millimeters in diameter for a platinum case with the special Egyptian hieroglyph dial. The lot also comes with this cherry colored wooden presentation box and has a pre-auction estimate set at roughly the range between 88,000 to 165,000 in US dollars. Speaking of fascinating and rare examples of Patek Philippe watches, absolute classics. This is Lot 57, which is a world time with a prototype dial, reference 5110G. So white gold piece, 38.5 millimeters in diameter, in white gold, with an interesting prototype dial, which might have an appeal to the right collector. Of course, a lot of times, well, probably for the most part, what really has an appeal to the collector is the unique dials, guilloche or cloisonné enamel dials that are offered with the world time. So the prototype dial, which is a two-tone white, off-white combination, and which looks quite unadorned for the kind of standards that Patek Philippe sets for itself for their world time watches. It might be, it might have an important value for the right person. To be fair, the watch does come with an additional guilloche dial. So you are still also getting a standard 5110G essentially with an additional guilloche dial. The piece does come with a presentation box as well as an archival extract from Patek Philippe that confirms the date of the sale on November 6th, 2003. As you can see here. And of course, one of the most attractive aspects of the world time watch, both the source of its slender and elegant profile, and in and of itself, quite an attractive aesthetic attraction. This is the 240 HU for Heure Universelle, which is the French phrase that's used for world time. Of course, coming from that time period where Patek Philippe movements were still finished, assembled, and regulated according to the standards of the Geneva Seal. And it does carry the hallmark on one of its bridge plates. Lot 57, which is a Patek Philippe World Time reference 5110G with a prototype dial, is expected to fetch an amount in the range between 44,000 to 88,000 in US dollars. Kind of a canary in the gold mine for Lot 58. the entry level FP jaune, so to speak, the chronomètre souverain. Of course, chronomètre bleu used to serve this function, but since it is now hyped up beyond recognition, the chronomètre souverain range seems to offer the entry point to a lot of new collectors to the FP jaune catalog. This is an example from 2008 in platinum and with that opaline white guilloche dial. This particular example is naked. So it's only the watch. As you can see, part of the traction here is the caliber 1304, which of course is largely executed in 18 carats pink gold in terms of its main plates and the base plates. I think honestly the chronomètre souverain is a beautiful watch. I've always loved the case design of FP jaune watches. Of course, the movement is beautiful both in its architecture and in its execution in 18 karat gold. Lot 58 has a pre-auction estimate that's set between roughly $33,000 to $55,000 in US dollars. Wow, I love the patina on this one. You guys know that I already have a soft spot for these round-cased perpetual calendars by Audemars Piguet. Of course, the Royal Oak over time may have become the bread and butter of AP, perhaps to the detriment of everything else, as some might argue. But many have made the argument that these round-cased perpetual calendars in the 80s were what really saved AP in the wake of the quartz crisis. And that argument is also borne out by the fact that AP was at the time probably one of the only brands that sold self-winding perpetual calendar watches in any significant serial production. This is a reference 25548 from roughly mid-80s, originally in yellow gold, but it has oxidized to such an extent that you might mistake it for pink gold. But the case is extremely well preserved otherwise, bearing crisp and legible hallmarks as well as the original finish. It seems like someone just stashed it away, and it is now emerging to be sold on public. As you can see, it has seemingly old but also seemingly unused AP factory strap. And as you can see, it also arrives with its box and papers. And of course, here is the setting pin as well. This is lot 60 for a very attractive example of an AP perpetual calendar, self-winding, reference 25548, 36 millimeter round case with a stepped bezel and rather stubby lugs, beautiful silvered opaline white dial with a distinctly balanced layout, the hour markers and the hour and minute hand reflect the gold tones of the case, whereas the calendrical functions are indicated with heat blued stainless steel hands, which enhances the legibility of this dial. The pre-auction estimate is set roughly within the range between 16,500 to 33 to a little bit more than 33,000 in US dollars. Please hit the like button. I really appreciate your support and presence. We're looking at Sotheby's Important Watches, which is a live auction that is going to take place this weekend in Geneva. At lot 61, we're looking at an Audemars Piguet jump hour piece from the now extinct Jules Audemars range. I really like the case design for these pieces. With their interplay of grain brushed and mirror polished facets, as well as the design of the softly downturned lugs and the rounded mid case. The watch is supremely attractive. This piece is a minute repeater as well. So very, very interesting and appealing in more ways than one. You're looking at reference 26151 in a 42 millimeter platinum case, mounted on a leather strap with a matching AP platinum folding clasp. As you can see, the watch has a silvered two-tone dial with a guilloche decoration at the center, an oversized subdial for seconds, and an elegantly twisted hand for the minutes, which indicates the minutes on a railroad-style track, Arabic numerals for the minutes, and a very nice aperture right under the signature for the indication of the hour. A little interesting for me always that these watches have a design where the minute hand actually partially blocks the hour at the top of the hour when it actually jumps. So that I always found puzzling, but it is what it is. As you can see on the left flank, this is the slide which activates the chiming functions of the watch. And you can see the classical architecture of the beautiful caliber. 3-finger with Geneva stripes on the bridges. Of course, you see here the black polished stainless steel hammers for the minute repeater. Minute repeater, jump hour watch. Audemars Piguet, Jules Audemars, reference 26151 in platinum from around 2016. As lot 61, this piece is expected to fetch an amount between 66,000 to 100,000 in US dollars. At lot 63, we have a AP Royal Oak anniversary model that was made for the Italian market. These are very interesting and rather cool, especially if you like that style of quote-unquote military dial, as they sometimes call it. Of course, this is not exactly that. I think it has an even more special touch, if you ask me, compared to those military dials. Because of the colors and the peculiar font. But that's, of course, just my subjective taste. This is a reference 15128. Which has very similar dimensions to the classic Jumbo, 39 millimeters in case diameter, and powered by the ultra-thin caliber 2121 line 3. As you can see, the watch is a two-hander with the date indicator at 3 o'clock, which of course almost immediately makes it identifiable as a caliber 2121. This series was produced for Italy in 50 units and features these oversized white numerals on either an olive green or blue dial. The blue dial is mounted on the watch, but it also comes with the green dial as well. And it's basically a full set with the box and papers, meaning the certificate of origin, certificate of authenticity, and exclusivity, the instruction manual, the numbered hang tag, additional olive green dial, as well as the presentation case and the outer packaging. The piece has an exhibition case back, which has a special rotor that marks it as an anniversary edition produced for Italy. The pre-auction estimate for lot number 63 is set in the range between 88,000 to 132,500. I think that olive green dial looks incredible. Again, the model is called Anniversaire Italie, and the reference is 15128 ST. Speaking of some beautiful Royal Oaks that you don't see every day, this is a Royal Oak Quinzième Perpétuel, reference 25554BA, a mid-80s example of a Royal Oak perpetual calendar. As you can see, this piece is relatively early in the life of perpetual calendars in a Royal Oak case, since the piece doesn't have indication for leap years. Of course, increasingly, AP perpetual calendars have gotten more and more complicated. They not only have leap year indicators these days, but also a weekly calendar that is indicated on the perimeter of the dial. This comes from a simpler age, so to speak. The AP Royal Oak perpetual calendar was introduced practically roughly in the same dimensions as the Royal Oak Jumbo in Baselworld of 1984 as reference 5554, which was soon reintroduced as 25554, which is the reference for this particular lot. This piece is, of course, in 18-karat yellow gold, case and integrated bracelet and all, 39 millimeters in diameter. It is only 7.9 millimeters, 7.5 millimeters thick, which is 0.4 millimeters thicker than the original Jumbo 5402. I think the black dial makes the piece very appealing and quite legible indeed. Of course, with the pencil hands, abbreviated baton indices, and nicely sized subdials for the calendar functions with the moon phase indicator at 6 o'clock. Jake Brooks, thank you so much. A member of the channel and a super chat of $9.99. Thank you so much. If you could only add one, number 89 or 91. Let's take a look. Lot 64, which we were just exploring, an early example of the AP Royal Oak perpetual calendar, reference 25554 in 18-karat yellow gold and with a stunning and subtle black dial. The piece is expected to fetch an amount in the range between 154,000 to 309,000 in US dollars. Let's take a look at Jake Brooks's two choices. numbers 89 and 91. Ooh. Should I respond to it based on your collection, JB, or just, you know, as a true hypothetical? Because, in general, my soft spot for 16520, the so-called Zenith Daytona, the original reference for the South-winding Daytona that was produced between the years 1988 and 2000. I like it for historical reasons. I like it for the extremely balanced, perfectly symmetrical dial layout. And I do prefer it with the white dial, but in this blacked out version, which again, as it happens with a lot of Rolexes, is a product of certain defects, which allowed the dial to look a certain way as in a tropicalization. Gives it a very unique and desirable look that you won't really find elsewhere. On my choice for my collection, I'm a white metal guy. So for me, it will have to be 91. The original Darth Vader with the tropical dial, which means that the subdials have basically turned all black, creating this uniform monochromatic black look that's only interrupted by the dial furniture, which includes, of course, the three rhodium-plated white gold rings that set off the chronograph registers. I like the balanced look of the dial, as I mentioned. The caliber 4030, which is Rolex's modification of the original Zenith El Primero caliber 400, allows this perfectly symmetrical layout where you can draw a line right through 80 on the tachymeter, through 9 o'clock, through the running seconds subdial, through the hand stack, through the 30-minute totalizer, and it will come out through the dots of 240 and slicing the crown into two as well. Yeah, I really love it. Again, 16520, I prefer the white dial because I think as an absolute Rolex classic from this neo-vintage era, it's also a watch that wears just as well on a leather strap. So it's beautiful here on its matching oyster bracelets, but I feel there's a lot more you can get out in terms of the feel of the watch when you have the white dial. But this all black is just extremely cool for a sports chronograph. That's one of the reasons I love my Type 20, right? The all black dial is quite appealing to me, whereas, the Daytona has something more of an elegant touch for me. And that's what's brought out by the white dial. But this black dial is very unique. So if it were a choice for me between these two, this is lot 91, by the way, for a Zenith Daytona with a special tropical dial that they call the Darth Vader, reference 16520, which has an estimate set between 66,000 to basically 100,000 in US dollars. The John Mayer is too flashy for me. I don't have a problem with a gold watch. I don't have a problem with a gold Daytona, but on the full bracelet with the green dial, I know if I had this watch, even if it were gifted to me, I would wear it on a very rare occasion. I feel it's just too much. Like in this day and age, especially, I feel it's just looking for trouble. Of course, with it being discontinued now, alongside the entire previous line of Daytona watches, it's just as collectible as that unique tropicalized Darth Vader dial. The prices seemingly took a shot in the arm immediately after the discontinuation, but then settled back into a relatively lower price point after the fact. But I think still these just carry way too much of a premium for my taste, with the particular association, with the particular hype around it. If I were to choose a precious metal Daytona from this generation, it would be the other gold Daytona that John Mayer showed on that famous episode of Talking Watches, and that was 116,509, the white gold with the blue dial. I think that to me is the one to get still, and that is still the better deal. And for my tastes, I like the fact that that one is white metal. So to me, infinitely more wearable, infinitely more discreet, even though it has a pretty flashy dial, to be brutally honest. I'm sure I would still wear it. I still won't wear it as an everyday watch, let's put it this way. But ultimately, for me, it's just more diverse and much more interesting. Let me pull. Actually, yeah. Let me pull up an example of that, so we have a better idea of what I would have chosen. Again, you still have a precious metal watch, of course. For those who know how to spot, will know exactly what this is as well. There's no such thing as a discrete Daytona in this day and age. But, I would prefer this to the 116508, the so-called John Mayer. And again, reminding all of you of the fact that John Mayer showed both this and the white gold version. Of course, he did single out this particular one because it's green and gold, which of course is very Rolex, right? The green writing and the gold coronet, or the crown, rather. And this piece, by the way, has an estimate set in the range between 55,000 to 77,000 for this auction. That was lot 89. Thank you for your question, and thank you for the generous super chats, JB. I appreciate you. I hope I gave you some value for money. Lot 65 is another absolute classic in its own rights. The Khanjar dials are quite attractive to many collectors of vintage Rolex watches for a number of reasons, some of which are aesthetic, others connected to their rarity, but altogether they represent, again, a moment in time where Rolex were, for their very special clients, making these kinds of watches with unique markings, symbols, and insignia on the dials. And that is not something you can get anymore. You can add to that list, of course, the double signed watches, right? Watches that also have the retailer signature on the dial. And certainly among all these watches, with unique dials and with specifically Arabic dials, the Khanjar has a particular aesthetic appeal to many collectors. Here, that sign is in red, has that traditional Armani dagger over crossed swords. What you're looking at is a Rolex Sea Dweller, reference 1665, in stainless steel from early 70s, once retailed by Asprey of London. Gotta love the classic profile of the Sea Dweller. I mean, with that tropic super dome crystal, which of course could not be fitted at the time with the Cyclops. And of course, that look without the magnifier has become part and parcel of the aesthetic, to the point that some collectors still, in a way, are lukewarm towards the Sea Dweller 43, the reference 126 600, which was first released on the 50th anniversary of the model, which was introduced in 1967. An absolute classic at lot number 65. A very interesting story for the issue of these watches, which I won't get into now, but which could be, at your request, an interesting narrative, because it has very weighty geopolitical significance, actually, that people usually don't think about. And perhaps also some lessons for our time as well. These pieces having the kind of rarity and the vintage charm and hype about them are, of course, quite a hefty investment, and lot 65 accordingly is expected to fetch an amount somewhere between 265,000 to about 420,000 in US dollars. There's a more contemporary khanjar. I have said that Rolex doesn't do, even for some of their most select clients, the kind of customization and bespoke treatments that they used to in the 60s, 70s, and even 80s and 90s. But they still engrave casebacks, which brings us to lot 63. This is actually a Rolex OP41 specifically, with the green dial. And it is an Armani special order. Which you can tell from the caseback, engraved with the royal insignia of the Sultanate of Oman, which once again features that traditional Omani dagger superimposed upon two crossed swords with the additional crown hovering above it. This piece also comes with the full suite of its accessories, which includes the presentation case as well as the outer packaging, which has the same khanjar stamp. This is lot 68 for a special version of the Rolex OP41 khanjar, reference 124300 from 2022, with a pre-auction estimate that's set between 22,000 to 33,000 in US dollars. Lot 70 is root beer in full gold, or the Mocha GMT, as it's sometimes called as well. With the classic nipple dial and a faded bronze bezel, which is more fitting somehow to the full gold version rather than the two-tone. Even though some of the two tones also come with that original bezel rather than the bicolor version. This is the 4-digit version with the nipple dial. The applied coronet being an easy way to distinguish between 1675 and 1675-8 or 1675-3. This piece is from 1972. And this piece, for better or worse, does not come with a matching bracelet, but it has lots of charm, not limited to the patina that it has accrued both on the dial and the case, which is otherwise relatively well preserved. Just to see the difference, again, this is a case that has been polished in the past, so the hallmarks are not as crisp and legible as they would have originally been. But there's still a lot of life left in this precious metal case for the Rolex GMT Master nipple dial, so-called root beer or mocha, in full 18 karat yellow gold, presented on seemingly a suede strap at lot number 70, with an estimated value set between 16,500 to roughly 29,000 in US dollars. As I grab another bottle of water, I want you to take a look at lot 74, which is an early example of the second generation of Vacheron Constantin's sports watch, the Overseas. Of course, there was no chronograph in the first generation of Overseas, so this is essentially the first generation of the chronograph, which was built on the base of the Fletig-Piguet 1185 movement, with the big date expression at 12 o'clock. You can see that this is an earlier example because it has the older bracelet design. That is not modeled after links that resonate with the Maltese cross symbology. And also the earlier examples of the chronograph have a slightly different aesthetic in terms of how the dials look, whereas the later versions with the big dates have kind of three different sizes on the chronograph registers, with the continuing running seconds at 6 o'clock around the same size, and then 12-hour counter at 9 o'clock slightly bigger, and the 30-minute totalizer at 3 o'clock as the big eye, as the largest chronograph register. This is a relatively rare gold example, 18 karat yellow gold. Overseas big date chronograph from around year 2005 at lot 74, with a pre-auction estimate set between $33,000 to $44,000 US dollars. Okay, let me grab my water. You're looking in the meantime at the older version from Vacheron Constantin's Maltz series. There's still a Maltz range in Vacheron Constantin selections, but they're offered in tonneau-shaped cases. This I found always as a much more exciting case design, with kind of talon lugs, right? You know, lugs that are styled as falcon's talons, slightly flaying out and with a kind of stepped styling. This is reference 47112, Vacheron Constantin Perpetual Calendar Chronograph. Here offered in a yellow gold case. The piece is from early 2000s, 2003. And it's really a beautiful design with an opaline white dial, an oversized pointer date at 6 o'clock, in which the moon phase indicator is ensconced, and that's in itself a gold plate, which matches beautifully with the case. A single Roman numeral at 12 o'clock. The two chronograph registers at 9 and 3, continuing running seconds, and a 30-minute totalizer respectively. Above that 30-minute totalizer, there's a portal-like opening for the leap year indicator, and at 12 o'clock, under the signature of the brand, you can also see the day of the week and the month. Broadsword styled hands, and of course a centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand as well. Even though it's a very classical expression of the prestige complication, perpetual calendar chronograph, I've always found, I think thanks to the styling of the case, I've always found this watch to be relatively sporty looking. And even though the diameter of the case is 39 millimeters with the unique styling of the lugs that splay out and have this step design, I think it's an extremely appealing and original piece. Of course, it doesn't hurt that, again, it's styled very uniquely with this half hunter case, a hinged case back, engraved with the signature of the brand, and which opens onto a classic base of Lemania CH27, which is nicely finished and has a swan neck regulator. Really a fantastic piece. And a very interesting price point too, as the estimates can testify. And that is set between roughly 22,000 to 44,000 in US dollars. You can certainly not get anywhere near a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chronograph at that price point. Hey, Chris, nice to see you, man. For everyone who have just joined the broadcast, we are looking at Sotheby's important watches. Here's the link if you want to scroll through the lots yourself as well. And feel free to send in lot numbers to me if you want me to take a closer look. Lot 78 is again a historic reference, this time from Patek Philippe, reference 2526. It was introduced in the early 50s, and it is the first automatic piece by Patek Philippe, the first Calatrava with a self-winding movement, namely the caliber 12-600 AT. And this watch is quite aspirational for many collectors, thanks also to its aesthetics, because the pieces have these gorgeous enamel dials, as you can see here in an off-white enamel execution. And the movements behind the case back, quite gorgeous as well, especially its full full oscillating weight, its full rotor is beautifully executed, to the point that some collectors have commissioned exhibition casebacks for their reference 2526s from Voutilainen et Catin, which is Kari Voutilainen's case maker. And they look absolutely stunning. Actually, let me see if I can find one of those examples. Oh, there we go. This is not the example on auction, but since they didn't have any pictures with the case back removed, I thought you should see the movement, which is historic for Patek Philippe as well, and quite gorgeous looking overall, with a full 18 karat gold rotor, very stylistic notches, and of course the rest of the caliber also aspires to a similar standards. Swan neck regulator, extremely gorgeous piece inside and out when you count the enamel dial. Lot 78 is an example in yellow gold with an off-white enamel dial. The measurement of the watch, the size of the watch is not too small either. It's right around 36 millimeters, I believe, closer to 35.5 than that. But for a dress watch, it wears really, really well. I really like the 570, Chris. I really do like the 570. I guess a 96 would do as well, because that's kind of like the quintessential Patek Philippe Calatrava reference. But you know, as much as I have a thinner wrist, and as much as I don't mind wearing smaller watches, there's still something quite attractive about the 570, because again, that's a watch that's right around 36 millimeters, whereas the 96 is much smaller than that. So I think the beauty, the compactness, the classic design makes the 96 very appealing, but the 570, you know, is much more wearable in year 2023. I mean, it's a watch that you can wear every day. Yes, it is still a little bit small. Yes, it is, you know, it's a Calatrava, so it's more dressy, but it doesn't have to be a special occasion piece, right? It's much more versatile than a 96, I think, but that's just my taste. Another watch that's really appealing to me, both because of the punch it packs, but also because of its design, which is very Art Deco. And I'm not just saying this because it is a rectangular watch, but because of the three-step flanks that give it this sort of architectural presence. This is the Patek Philippe 5101G. It's a tourbillon wristwatch with a 10-day power reserve, executed in the traditional Patek tradition. Traditional Patek way, I meant to say. Sorry, it's getting late, and I did already tell you that I'm a little tired. So on the face of the watch, you only see the inscription tourbillon and the caliber number, which are both nestled here in that small second subdial at 6 o'clock. The indication for the 10-day power reserve counterbalances that under 12 o'clock. Applied Breguet numerals on the backdrop of a dark blue dial, a railroad track for minutes, and leaf-shaped hands. A stunning design, which also has a slight curvature, giving it a certain ergonomic advantage as well. And you can see the 10-day caliber designed and shaped for the rectangular case as well. And here's the tourbillon, which has a very beautifully finished and slender bridge. Very beautiful watch. The 5101 in general. And I have a particularly soft spot for the white gold version too, with this example coming from 2011 with the full suite of its accessories. This is Patek Philippe 5101G, a white gold tourbillon wristwatch with a 10-day power reserve and a pre-auction estimates in the range, set in the range between 110,000 to an amount in excess of 165,000 in US dollars. Oh, that's a heavyweight, Chris. 570 in pink gold with Piguet numerals. That sounds amazing to me as well. The platinum version is not too shabby either, as you can see. Of course, it's even more spendy. It's even spendier than the white gold. This is the Patek Philippe 5101P. So the tourbillon wristwatch with the 10-day power reserve in platinum. It gets a salmon dial in this case. But of course, otherwise, with the case being in platinum, everything remains the same, including this stunningly executed and beautifully designed tourbillon movements peeking through the back. Of course, this is also a pre-2009 example, so it still carries the hallmark of Geneva as well. Not a bad look at all. This piece also comes with the full suite of its accessories and has actually a similar estimate between 110,000 to 165,000 in US dollars. Lot 84 is another piece that I really like, both in terms of its design and in terms of, again, its 10-day power reserve caliber. This is not a tourbillon, but it has the same base movement. The so-called manta ray. This was the design that Patek brought out to welcome the new millennium. It is inspired by, essentially by vintage models that come from Patek's archive. In this particular iteration, the reference 5100 was produced in a limited run of 3,000 pieces, 1,500 of them in yellow gold, 750 in pink gold, 450 in white gold, and 300 in platinum. I guess you can roughly guess why it's called manta ray, because it kind of looks like that oceanic creature due to its unique design with a case with flared size. For this pink gold version, it's given a gray dial and again a 10-day movement designed for the case and decorated beautifully as well with the hallmark of Geneva. The case back is inscribed with the writing year 2000. As mentioned, there were only 750 examples of the pink gold. Here, the watch comes with the full suite of its accessories. And of course, the design of the dial is beautifully balanced as well, with the 10-day power reserve indicator counterbalancing the small seconds at 6. Arabic numerals alternates with arrow-shaped hour markers, which complement the Dauphine hands quite nicely. Again, a classical shape, which is given modern expression by Patek at lot 84. The manta ray in pink gold 5100R from year 2000 with a pre-auction estimate set roughly between 22,000 to 33,000 in US dollars. Lot 85 is the Gondolo Calendario, a tonneau-shaped annual calendar watch by Patek Philippe. The reference number is 5135G, so in white gold, with Arabic numerals at 3 and 9. A moon phase indicator at 6 o'clock, which is ensconced within a day-night indicator at 24-hour hand. A stunning two-tone gray dial matches the white gold case, which is 38 millimeters in diameter. And the 3 calendar indications are set at around 10 o'clock for the day of the week, exactly at 12 o'clock for the date, and at around 2 o'clock for the month. The hour and minute hands are styled as Dauphine with a sweep center seconds hand, self-winding movement with a full rotor, here with the hallmark of Geneva. The watch is from 2006 and is offered with the full set of its accessories. This is lot 85, which is expected to realize a final hammer price somewhere in the range between 26,500 to an amount in excess of 38,600 in US dollars. Lot 86 is probably one of my favorite designs ever for Patek Philippe. I've always liked how untimely this design is, how out of sync it seems with the direction that Patek has headed in the 21st century, increasingly since Thierry Stern took over. This is a very classic look with a case that is styled very much like an officer's watch. Round case with extended lugs with screw-through bars that attach it to the leather strap. Kind of an onion-shaped crown. And a dial that screams conservatism, even with the choice of fonts and not only the Roman numerals. A guilloche decoration at center, which resembles so many rays of sunshine. The signature is carried by a plaque at 12 o'clock with a leap year indicator right above it. There are two wickets at 9 and 3 o'clock for the day of the week and the month respectively. And the date is indicated on a scale that goes around the center dial and is shaped like a downward facing crescent with a red arrow hand, and that is a retrograde indicator, so it snaps, that red arrow hand snaps back to 1 at the beginning of each month, and that's quite a satisfactory sight for a perpetual calendar. The Roman numerals are very classically styled and slightly elongated, beautifully slender, with a watchmaker's 4 at 4 o'clock. The moon phase indicator peeks through an aperture at 6 o'clock, and the hands are in the style of spade with an elegantly twisted minute hand. There is a sweep center seconds hand which matches the yellow gold of the case. The diameter is 38, although the watch wears slightly bigger. with those extended lugs. Not too much bigger because they are, as you can see, very nicely downturned. The piece has an hinged case back. Unfortunately, Sotheby's didn't bother photographing the movement. The piece comes with a presentation case. But no papers or even an archival extract, I meant to say. By the way, this is a 5159R, and I was wondering about that because this looks like pink gold, but I was fooled by the description. Anyway, let me find you a nice image of the movement because it is worth taking a look at. Here's an example. The hinged case back, of course, is a very elegant way of showing this movement because the inside of it can always serve as a kind of mirror. A very beautiful watch indeed. This is lot 86 for Patek Philippe 5159R. Classic officer-styled perpetual calendar watch with a retrograde date hand. The case is 38 millimeters in pink gold. The pre-auction estimate is set between roughly 33,000 to an amount in excess of 55,000 in US dollars. Lot 88 is a double red Sea Dweller, which, as you know, has a certain pride of place for me among vintage Rolex watches. This is the first official reference number for the Rolex Sea Dweller. And early examples of this watch had two lines of writing on that matte black dial, namely both Sea Dweller and Submariner 2000. This is an example that has aged gracefully with relatively even patina on the dial and the hands in terms of the luminous material and a nicely faded bezel. Again, that's a UFO kind of look from the profile, thanks to that super dome original tropic crystal. This is lot 88 for a Rolex Sea Dweller double red reference 1665. The pre-auction estimate is set roughly in the range between 33,000 to an amount in excess of 55,000 in US dollars. We have taken a look at lots 89 and 91, thanks to Jake Brooks and his generous super chat. So let's take a look at the Daytona that stands right between them, and that is very expressive of that gem set sports watch style that we were just talking about. This is a white gold piece, 116589 RBR is the reference number. The tachymeter bezel has given away to a diamond set bezel with 2 rows of brilliant cut diamonds, which also appear as hour markers on the dial, on the rubellite dial. And this is one of those Daytonas, one of those precious metal Daytonas from, of course, way before the age of oyster flex. So it is presented on a leather strap that coordinates with the color of the rubellite dial. And of course, the white gold case is matched with a white gold déployant clasp as well. The case is very nicely preserved, even though it might not be perfect. And you can see it has that period appropriate cherry colored wooden presentation box. No papers, however, which is a shame for a unique and beautiful watch like this. Relatively early example also of the in-house movement, right? Because the watch is from 2001. As you guys know, Rolex introduced the caliber 4130 for the new millennium as well. That was their first in-house chronograph movement. And that set a new tone, of course, for the brand, for the hierarchy of their models, but also for the industry at large. Daytona was in many ways the first hype watch of the new century. Perhaps the first hype watch ever. This is lot 90 for a Rolex Cosmograph Daytona in white gold on a leather strap, gem set with diamonds on the bezel and the dial, and a semi-precious stone dial, namely a rubellite dial. A beautiful shade of blood red on the dial and the strap. The piece is expected to fetch an amount in the range between 44,000 to 66,000, roughly speaking. Please hit the like button. I have about 7 more watches left. I think I'm going to take a look at all of these remaining pieces because they're all absolutely stunning. But if you have any questions, if you have any particular questions about this auction and about watches in general, feel free to send them in with a super chat. If you're on your way out, please hit the like button. If you have just stumbled on this live stream somehow, somewhere, please do subscribe. I have daily watch content on this channel in the form of live streams, to be sure, but also many other videos, interviews with industry insiders, experts, and collectors, as well as kind of market explorations in the form of hunting for deals, with videos that range from 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes a little longer, where I focus on a particular genre, on a particular complication, on a brand or a model, to find the best deals for you. And even though those deals in and of themselves might be quite specific, because I always discuss these watches within their context and with lots of historical and horological detail. Those videos, I think, have long-lasting relevance. So check them out. There's also a lot of exclusive content for members as well. So sign up for that if you would like to support the channel. If you would like to contribute more, you know how, but the links are there in the video description. And let's look at this Daytona Big Red at lot 92, reverse panda configuration with silvered white chronograph registers against the backdrop of a black dial, and of course the red Daytona writing over the 12-hour counter, which gives, with its big font, the name to this Daytona. This is a reference 6263. Screw down pushers and bakelite acrylic inserts for the tachymeter bezel. As you can probably tell, the new aesthetic of the Daytona with the recently introduced 126-500 family mimes these classic designs with the bezel ring of matching material to the case. As much as the dials are quite apparently inspired by the first generation of self-winding Daytonas, the 16520 we were just talking about with the Zenith El Primero caliber 400 based movements. The 6263, of course, as with many other references of the 4-digit Daytonas, is powered by a caliber based on Valjoux 72, in this case caliber 727. This particular piece comes with a presentation box as well as its original warranty papers. Lot 92, accordingly, of the Rolex Cosmograph Daytona, reference 6263, the big red from late 70s, has a pre-auction estimate that's set roughly between 72,000 to 94,000 in US dollars. Lot 93 is a watch from Patek Philippe's Advanced Research series, which is a line of watches where they introduce in limited editions models that exhibit some of the innovative components and at times experimental technologies that they showcase. This is the reference 5550p, a perpetual calendar in platinum, which was offered in a limited edition of 300 pieces. On the face of it, perhaps there's not much of a distinction, except, of course, with the contrasting dial fixtures, so to speak, which are not matched with the platinum case. And, of course, the advanced research writing. The piece has an extended power reserve, however, and a higher rate accuracy and a more dependable performance. It enhances the power reserve of the micro rotor caliber 240Q to 70 hours. This is the QSI. So it includes the following Cylinvar components: the patented Patek Philippe Spiromax balance spring, the patented Pulsomax escapement, and the patented Gyromax Psi balance. And as you can see, those elements of the movement are given a magnifier to be examined more closely, if you would like, when you turn around the watch and gaze through the exhibition case back. The piece, of course, comes as a full set and in a well-preserved condition, with its unique box, as well as the product literature and the certificate of origin. Lot 93 has a pre-auction estimate that is set between roughly 88,000 to 132,500 in US dollars. Lot 94 is an early example of FP Jaune chronomètre résonance from right around year 2000. This is a model that is called in the collector speak pre-subscription or pré-souscription. The reason for that is because there were about 30 examples of this model that precedes the official subscription series, the so-called pre-production watches for the year 1999, and the pre-subscription watches, including this particular example, which were made in year 2000. The pink gold dial has produced some oxidization, The chronomètre à résonance is, of course, François-Paul Jones's execution of the principle of resonance, which was first demonstrated in the world of watches, in the horological world, by none other than Abraham Louis Breguet, who had implemented it in pocket watches that were around, I believe, 60 plus millimeters. I want to say maybe 63 millimeters in diameter. So it was quite a feat when François-Paul Jones managed to fit in a 38 millimeter wristwatch two separate gear trains that, by their proximity, through the principle of resonance, somehow compensated for each other's errors. Of course, the two separate off-center dials are bolted on that pink gold background, which has gained this very attractive salmon colored hue with additional points of oxidization. There's also a power reserve indicator that's roughly nestled between these two off-center dials. Of course, there are two separate crowns, which will allow you to set each one of these dials, each one of those quote-unquote movements with their distinct time. The seconds coordinates ultimately through the principles of resonance. But of course, many have used this watch, since you could set them separately, as a dual time watch, as a 2 time zone watch. Of course, this is a rhodium plated brass movement. It is, after all, a pre-subscription. Its box and the certificate of authenticity. Lot 94 comes up on auction with an eye-watering estimate between 550,000 to an amount in excess of 1,100,000 in US dollars. Another beautiful platinum FP Jaune in the next lot. Lot 95 is tourbillon souverain à remontoir d'égalité. Tourbillon wristwatch with a constant force mechanism. It's a beautiful design that juxtaposes a tourbillon cage with that off-center dial, with which it is given basically the same kind of prominence, right? Same size, the tourbillon cage and the off-center dial. The tourbillon cage itself is, of course, surrounded with a sector for minutes. Sector for seconds, which allows it to be also used for the indication of seconds. There's also a power reserve indicator, and look at the remontoir mechanism through a cutout on the dial. Again, beautiful pink gold backdrop. Rhodium plated brass movements, caliber 1498. This particular example is from 2001. The Tourbillon Souverain was introduced in the 1999 edition of the Baselworld. It was, at the time, the very first wristwatch to use the remontoir mechanism, which of course maintains consistency in timekeeping by regulating the fluctuating force, the depleting amplitude as the power reserve of the movement dries up. This piece does come with an FP Jaune presentation box, and a certificate of authenticity will be provided by FP Jaune with a new owner name. Apparently, there's also a travel pouch. The estimated value of the watch is set between 442,000 to 884,000 in US dollars, roughly speaking. Lot 96 is probably one of my absolute favorites from FP Jaune. This is an octachronograph which was produced for about 4 years before it was replaced by the centigraph. Yeah, sorry about the microphone crapped out in the last minute, so I apologize. I don't exactly know what you missed, um, but I was talking about the octachronograph at lot 96, which is one of my favorite FP Jaune models ever made, produced for a relatively short run of about 4 years, I believe. Quickly replaced by the Centigraph. This piece is a much more traditionally designed chronograph that has the vibe of pocket watch chronographs in the sense that it has an off-center dial with for hours and minutes with overlapping seconds sub-dial, but a centrally deployed chronograph seconds hand that traverses the entire dial. There's a 60-minute totalizer at 9 o'clock in relation to that off-center dial, and a big date indicator at 11 o'clock. This particular example is in platinum, 40 millimeters in case diameter, and is further distinguished by a rare ruthenium-coated dial that is matched with ruthenium-plated brass movement on the back. The piece accordingly has a pre-auction estimate that's set roughly between 165,000 to an amount in excess of 331,000 in US dollars. And thank you for alerting me. Jake Brooks. I have two more watches, both of which are George Daniels pieces made by Roger Smith. We have talked about these watches before, but it's good to see them on auction as well. Both watches are premium lots, lots 97 and 98. Lot 97 has an estimate in excess of 1 million Swiss francs. This is the George Daniels Millennium #1 that's also signed on the dial by R.W. Smith, by Roger Smith. Perhaps the most distinguished names from the recent history of British watchmaking and independent watchmaking more generally. This piece was completed in 2001 as the last example of the Millennium series, and it was literally assigned or allocated, you might say in today's language, to Smith himself. Accordingly, Roger Smith asked for permission from George Daniels to have his signature on the dial as well, which Daniels happily obliged, which makes this piece not only the last example of the Millennium series, but also the only watch ever signed by both Daniels and Smith, and the first wristwatch that was ever signed by Smith himself. watch is also signed on the case back, as you can see, as Roger W. Smith 01, which further establishes that fact. Of course, it has that important invention by George Daniels, the coaxial escapement, and an off-center self-winding movement with an off-center oscillating weight. The movement is decorated in the traditional British style with frosted gilt bridges, but it's beautifully framed with hand engraving, and the rotor itself has a stunning barleycorn pattern as well. Of course, the dial of the watch is produced from a gold blank, silvered and decorated in a manner that is worthy of the two names represented on the dial, especially George Daniels, who of course literally wrote the book on the art of Breguet. Kind of a fish scale pattern frames the entire affair in the form of a shape akin to a crescent. The center of the dial has a basket weave pattern, and the pointer date at 6 o'clock has Clou de Paris, or a hobnail pattern. The hour track has Roman numerals on Breguet frosted track, which is framed by coin-edged decoration. The watch is otherwise a three-hander with a set of arrow hands and a center sweep seconds, all of which are heat-blued in stainless steel. The crown is at 8 o'clock. Stepped bezel and nicely extended and beautifully downturned lugs for this 38 millimeter white gold piece. Again, the last of the Millennium series, the only watch to be signed by both Daniels and Smith, and the first watch to be signed by Roger Smith, first wristwatch to be signed by Roger Smith, and at some point also his personal watch, with an estimate in excess of 1 million Swiss francs for lot 97. Lot 98, which is the last watch we are going to discuss today. So if you have any questions, if you have any requests, or if you simply want to make a last-minute contribution, this is your chance. You're looking at George Daniels' anniversary number 1. The classic design in a 40 millimeter yellow gold case. The anniversary series were supposed to commemorate the 35th anniversary of the invention of the coaxial escapement. Daniels's pride and joy. Of course, the coaxial escapement was also commercialized, was sold to and commercialized by Omega in 1999. This is the number 1. The Millennium series had an Omega base caliber. The Anniversary had an entirely new in-house English movements designed and wholly made in Daniels's Isle of Man workshop. It was supposed to be limited to just 35 pieces for the 35 years. It was slightly extended, as you may have heard elsewhere, and as we previously talked about. This is the very first watch from the series, prominently numbered 1 on the back plate. As you can see, beautiful oversized screws, thermally treated in that brown purple color, which is even more unique and even more difficult to achieve than the heat blue, because the timing has to be so much faster and more limited to achieve that color. The Isle of Man symbol looks at us right here. The hand-wound in-house caliber with the coaxial escapement. That's the coaxial escapement, and that's the symbol of the Isle of Man. So the Anniversary watch also happens to be, therefore, the first watch to have been designed and made in its entirety at the Isle of Man, or on the Isle of Man. Very distinct in terms of its look, with an up-down power reserve indicator at 12 o'clock, off-center seconds at 5 o'clock, and a pointer date at 7 o'clock. Again, a panoply of guilloche patterns, engine turned by hand on this silver dial. The dial furniture matches the gold tones of the case. A stunning watch. Again, very historically significant. Very much representative of both George Daniels and Roger Smith. This is Anniversary number 1, an early example of George Daniels's Anniversary series, which celebrates the 35th year of his invention of the coaxial escapement, in yellow gold. The piece at lot 98 has an estimate in excess of 500,000 Swiss francs. Hey, Nelson Oliveira, thank you so much. $20 Canadian. Always enjoy the show. And hey, Jake. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Guys, we have come to the end of another show. I will be with you tomorrow as well, hopefully for the full 4 hours, maybe even longer. Who knows? Maybe I'll find a second wind again and we can go for even longer. You know, I always miss you when I'm not there. I always want to make it up to you. So if you have any suggestions, any further questions, please put them in the comments once the live stream ends. That also helps me boost the live stream a little bit, get a few more eyes on it, move it up in, you know, with the algorithm. So hit the like button, share it with other people, go through the other content and do the same. That's the biggest support you can give to the channel. Of course, any other contributions, including but not limited to the super chats, help a lot as well. It really keeps the lights on at this point and helps me push forward as I'm trying to make this a full-time endeavor for me. So I really appreciate your help in that. And of course, memberships are great as well, and they come with a bunch of exclusive content, which will be enhanced as time goes by. And you all know, whatever you have given to this channel comes back to you in terms of my knowledge, my expertise, my dedication, but also in terms of the increase, which I believe is noticeable in the quality and quantity of content. And this is only the beginning. So I hope you'll stay with me. Thank you again for your presence and support. Hit the like button on the way out if you haven't already. My special thanks to Jake Brooks and Nelson Oliveira for their super chats. That means a lot to me. I hope I will see each and every one of you tomorrow as well, starting at 8 o'clock Pacific, still daylight savings time. I'll see you then, and we'll talk about more watches, probably continue at the last gasp our auction previews as well. And if you have any questions in the meantime, again, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll see you next time. Until then, wear your watches and enjoy them. Love you all. See you soon.